The movie starts with a female mechanic, Jess, spray painting a car, making it look brand new. She takes off her helmet proudly after a job well done. The next scene shows Luke on a motorcycle driving by. He slows down on noticing a packed-up truck with a stranded driver and asks if the driver needs help. The driver finds it hard to believe he knows anything about car repairs, looking the way he does with his business suit. Luke easily diagnoses a faulty radiator hose. He creates a temporary fix and hands the driver a brochure should they need a permanent fix. With the help rendered, he gets back on his motorcycle and drives off. Back to Jess. She has a love more for cars than men, and this worries her friend Terry, who feels Jess can make a little more effort and put herself out there. She's got admirers, like a client the previous day who dropped his number after she got his car fixed. But an exasperated Jess claims he wasn't her type. She affirms she doesn't need romance because she's contented with her career and her passion for cars. Meanwhile, Luke arrives at the company in a hurry. His shirt is stained from the act of his benevolence earlier on, so he takes it off. Leaving an inner vest, he puts his blazer on. An apology rolls off his tongue as he enters the boardroom. But the meeting is already over, and his father isn't happy that he missed it. Luke is the VP of corporate strategy, and the meeting needed his presence. Luke tries to explain why he's late in an evasive way, but he's missed his dirty hands, and now his father knows he was toying with cars, hence his lateness. Luke mentions he was only trying to be a friendly and helpful passerby. And while his father softens, he reminds Luke that his future is with the company and not under hoods. Luke notices a map on the meeting's projector screen, and the father explains the company is looking to acquire a mechanic's workshop space. Luke doesn't like the idea, but the father maintains it's a good project plan for the company. Jess battles with stage fright, and Terry has just made it worse by advertising Jess's class on social media, meaning more people will turn up. It feels like a prison sentence, but Terry maintains it's good for business, and Jess will do great. Jess faces the class of expectant women and nervously introduces them to Barrow's Auto Repair. She introduces herself as the head auto technician at the workshop and has on display the topic of the day titled Automotive Fundamentals for Beginners. She kicks off the class with an orientation on spark plugs. After the class, Jess has a buddy talk with Terry's daughter, Eden. Eden is an aspiring photographer with substantial talent and has a vision to get picked to be the photographer for her school's paper the following year. She needs something great to photograph and present to her teacher, so she stands a chance, and Jess gets an idea. Mr. Barrow, Jess's dad, comes in with a new scrap for Jess to play with. Eden doesn't understand why Jess is getting hyped over a seemingly wreck of a car, but Jess explains a little love could transform the car into something new. Mr. Barrow gets a call on his phone and excuses himself to take it. He wears a worried look that his daughter fails to notice. He concludes the call away from earshot and notifies Jess he'll step out for a while to run errands. He lies, saying he's fine when she asks, and none the wiser, she lets it be. Luke is out with his friend and co-worker Pete for some drinks. Luke opens up that he'd like to say no to his dad sometimes and feels his position at the office is rather mundane. He missed when his grandfather was in the picture. Then the business was smaller, but it felt more fulfilling. Pete advises that Luke just has to find common ground with his father on what's best for the company. Luke appreciates the advice and parts because he has a date to meet up with. He realizes, though, that who's missing his keys. Jess and Terry arrive at the same bar. Terry excuses herself to make a quick phone call to her daughter, while Jess goes ahead to order the drinks. She notices someone's dropped their keys and picks them up. Luke comes in just then to retrieve them, and it's an instant awkward meeting for the ex-lovers. Luke wants to know how Jess has been, but Jess is a bit hostile, wanting to skip the small talk. She eventually hands him back his keys, wishing him fun on his date, fighting the wave of emotions threatening to spill from seeing and talking to him again. Even Terry doesn't know much about Luke, because Jess never wants to talk about him. Terry insists this time, and Jess opens up about her father and Luke's father being business partners when she and Luke were in college. Luke's grandfather had wanted the two business partners to take over the company, but Luke's father wasn't ready to share that pie. Jess's grievance is that Luke knew his father's motive all along and never gave the Barrows a heads up. Mr. Barrow was left blindsided and had to pick up himself from scratch. Jess is at work when the TV star Wayne LaRoche from a popular car show turns up at the shop. He tells her work got to him. She did an impressive car restoration for his friend. Now he'd like her to be a contestant on a car restoration show in the making. It's a mind-blowing offer to Jess, and she'd be the only woman contestant, which would be intriguing to the audience. She stands a chance to win $50,000, and the contest will be held at the Car Fest in Alden. Jess feels the need to reject the offer because of her stage fright, but Wayne remains adamant, handing her his card. Should she change her mind? He's sure she'd fit perfectly with the agenda of the show and looks forward to a change of heart. Jess tells her father about her encounter with Wayne. At some point, she notices he seems fidgety and confronts him about it. She's noticed he's been off for a while and doesn't back off when he tries to wave her off now. He voices the phone call from earlier was from their landlord, ready to give them a tough time. Jess suggests a loan, but it's not a palpable option. Her mind goes back to her conversation with Wayne and the price of money. The father rejects Jess trying to win the money to save the garage. He would rather she goes into the competition because it's something she wants to do. She has her fears, one of them being a woman in a man's business. But her father assures her she's good at what she does and she'll be fine. Jess arrives at the car fest and spots a man having trouble with his car. He's dismissive of her ability to help or understand the problem, but she calmly puts him through a test to show that she was right, and he was wrong about the problem with his car. Luke had been watching the exchange and commended Jess for still holding on to lessons from his grandfather. He continues to try being friendly, wanting to go down memory lane, but Jess once again is hostile. They both go their separate ways, stealing glances at each other. Jess goes to the Pinefield bed and breakfast, and Wayne is excited to see her. He relays he's had a plot twist of a day with one of his contestants dropping out of the show at the last minute. He was, however, able to find a replacement, and that's no other than dear Luke. Jess takes Wayne aside to address the issue of Luke being a fellow contestant, but he sniffs the tension between them as love-related and decides it makes for good television. Both Jess and Luke had failed to mention earlier, when they met, that they were both in the competition. 3 other contestants pick on the building drama, and one of them, Kevin, introduces him and the other 2 guys as their fellow contestants. Jess and Luke take a competitive look at themselves and decide they'll go neck and neck. The show kicks off with Luke and Jess still in competitive spirits. Luke is up for the win, and Jess is ready to prove him wrong. The audience, on the other hand, is ready to eat up the drama. The contestants include Kevin, Ike, Clark, Luke, and Jess. For the opening round, the contestants will have 2 minutes to sand down a randomly selected car hood from one of the available vehicles. The winner of the round will get to choose which vehicle to restore and assign another vehicle of their choice to the runner-up. This will then be the contestant's vehicle to work with for the rest of the show. The round starts and Jess takes a deep breath, trying to deal with her stage fright. She coaches herself to pretend the audience isn't there and gets to work. She and Luke get into a rift, and it affects their time and focus. Wayne comments that the Michigan mechanics have experienced a fallback, but the audience should still hold on to their seats, as the judges will decide the final outcome. The results come in after a short break, and Ike is declared the winner. Terry and Jess meet up, and Jess relays that Luke is being extra difficult and petty. He was ahead of her on the leaderboard and assigned her the most beat-up car to restore. Terry feels that Jess can interpret it to mean that Luke is indirectly saying she's the only one good enough to work with that car. A receptive Jess sees the beauty in the challenge and nods her head in approval. She's still worried about her fright and attributes her fear to the emotional trauma of losing her mom. Terry promises to be in the crowd to support her friend and Jess Mans, up knowing she has a lot to prove, especially to her disrespectful ex. Jess laments a little to her dad afterward, who reinforces her confidence. He won't be there to support her in person because he has to keep the workshop running, so he sends his love. Jess battles with the coffee machine in the breakfast inn, and Luke shows up to help her with it. He apologizes for what went down during the first round, and she takes part of the blame because she knows she was on edge. Luke goes down memory lane, and Jess doesn't try to fight him, recalling with him a time they both fondly remember. She addresses the car Luke assigned her, and he explains that he assigned her because he knew she could handle it. Jess keeps running into her ex, this time while she's with Terry and Eden. Luke is with Pete. They let the awkwardness fly, and Luke, while they continue their walk, voices to Pete that he wishes Jess would forgive him for what happened years ago. He stood on not taking anyone's side, and Peter makes him understand that maybe that's the problem, and Jess's anger. On the next round of the show, the contestants play a trivia quiz with Wayne letting them know that this is an elimination round. Jess gets the first question correct, and Luke gets the second question right. Their supporters, Pete and Terry, are all smiles and cheers in the crowd. The game tallies with Jess struggling to remember the answer to a particular question. Time runs out before she can get the answer, and she's a little down, but both she and Luke are far from losers. Kevin is in the lead, and Clark will be eliminated because he came in fourth. Wayne discusses with his colleague that Jess's stage fright might prove a problem eventually. As everyone else begins to file out, Terry pulls her friend over. The next scene shows Terry putting Jess through a Zen exercise that she doesn't want to be put through. The guys are playing football outside the inn, and this irritates Jess because Luke can see her and all of the Zen ridiculousness. The guys discuss discuss Jess a bit. Ike hits that there are unmentioned grievances the ex-couple have yet to settle. Luke doesn't deny this, hoping that Jess heals soon. Terry has to give Jess a strong pep talk after she admits that she feels under a lot of pressure. Jess is still not interested in the Zen exercises. For the next round, Kevin tries to get under Jess's skin because she'll be working with the Thunderbolt. Their mission is to fix the headlights, battery, and rewiring of their cars using some vintage parts. They'll be working in teams with both Kevin and Ike on the Skylark, while Luke and Jess will work on the Thunderbolt. Whichever team gets their headlight to turn on first wins. Luke and Jess get to work, and Jess is less nervous and more in her element, which Luke admires. It's the old Jess he remembers. On their first try, they blow a fuse while turning on the engine, but Jess thinks fast, and in the midst of Luke's doubting, she asks him to trust her. He lets her lead, and both teams go neck and neck, but Jess's team beats Kevin's to turning on their engine and having their headlight working. Excited, Jess and Luke hug over their victory. On the scoreboard, Jess is now in third place with Kevin still in first. Luke is also safe, nestled between the two. After that round, Luke calls his dad, wanting him to reconsider snagging the land from the Barrows. His father isn't listening, but Luke continues to plead, appealing for the sake of history between their family and the Barrows. Inasmuch as they're competitors, he doesn't want them to end up enemies. His father feels he's letting emotions cloud his better judgment and requires that Luke keeps his mouth shut about the company's plans of taking the Barrow auto repair spot. Luke doesn't want history to repeat itself, having to hide important information from Jess, and Luke's father agrees to put a pause on their mission for Luke's sake. In the meantime, he wants Luke to represent them well on the show. Luke meets up with Jess, who's watching enthusiastically a young girl showing interest in cars. It takes her back to when she was younger, and Luke commends that she's being a clear inspiration. He also mentions that Wayne has a social activity planned for the contestants as a way to bond. When Luke and Jess aren't being pro-mechanics, they're being pro-roller skaters at the rink and recalling childhood memories that lead to them pulling dance moves from the past. On the other hand, Kevin and Ike aren't meant to be on skates. Over pizza and an untouched burrito, Jess expresses she's surprised that Luke still remembers their old dance routine. He admits he still practices it often, and it makes Jess tease him about his work, like she's frequently done since they reunited. Luke offloads he's doing a job that isn't so great to him, but he's doing it because he couldn't say no to his dad. Jess doesn't see how that's possible. Changing the line of discussion, she asks about Luke's mom, who's fine, and has lived in Arizona since the divorce from Luke's dad. Luke tells Jess the competition has brought out Jess's resemblance to her mom, which comes as a surprise to her. Jess believes her mom possesses a confidence she's lacking, but Luke insists both mother and daughter are alike. They're both driven and impressive, and Jess finds herself thanking Luke for the unexpected affirmation. Jess gets together with her dad, and he's happy that she's taken part in the competition. She admits she didn't expect to, but she's loving every moment of it. As for the garage, the landlord is still holding firm, but Jess's father doesn't want Jess to worry. He's applied for a loan, even though Jess worries regardless. She wants to win the competition, knowing the money will stop them from losing the garage. The show's next take is a Q&A on the contestants to get to know them better. Jess's father is in attendance today, and the baton has been passed on to Jess with Wayne and the audience wanting to know about her earlier childhood around cars. She tells them she's loved classic cars from a young age. For her, cars were a big instigator for the particular childhood that she had. Much older now, she's into car restoration in a poetic attempt to keep memories alive. Memories only possible through the aid of cars. Jess and Luke get to talk about their dating life. Luke's previous date wasn't a match, and Jess reveals she's had difficulties in the dating world as well. For them both, they've yet to find someone compatible with them. Jess spots a car model that brings her memory of her first and successful attempt at car restoration. Luke was a part of that memory, and he asks Jess how often she still does car restoration. Restoration doesn't pay the bills, but basic mechanic services do, and she's quite scared to venture out into her own business. Luke believes she'd make it big, but Jess leaves it all to dreams for now. She's carrying a heavy load, and Luke offers to be a shoulder to lean on. Jess lets on that she and her dad have run into financial issues at the garage. She expresses that was her driving purpose for joining the show, but time has made her appreciate the process more. Regardless, she's glad she's found common ground with the task of competing and yet having fun, as the last thing she needs is excess pressure. Luke, on hearing this, chickens out on telling her about something he needs to get off his chest. The new challenge is to diagnose the fault in their car engines and repair it. Jess is in the lead while Ike is having a hard time. Jess and Luke continue their now less tense and more friendly banter on camera, giving the audience a good show. The first 3 contestants to fire up their engines will move on to the next round. Whoever comes in last will head home. Jess gets her engine running first, but Luke prevents her from an accident involving the unexpected jerking from the car. It's an intense moment with Luke holding on closely for several moments, while Jess regains her bearings. Even the audience holds their breath. At the end of the day, Ike goes home, leaving just 3 standing. Luke introduces Pete to Jess. He's a marketing director at Luke's father's company, Tune Up Wiz. Luke walks Pete to his car and opens up about the latest burden he's been carrying. Pete is pumped about him possibly winning the game, but Luke doesn't want to because he knows that Jess and her dad need the money more. Pete questions if he's discussed Tune Up Wiz's agenda with Jess, but Luke hasn't, reasoning that Jess won't take it well. Pete thinks the situation is an opportunity for Luke to redeem himself in her eyes, and he shouldn't mess it up by withholding the truth from her once again. He might think he's trying to protect her, but he'll only end up losing her again. Eden's photojournalism exhibition is that night, and Terry and Jess are talking about it when Luke walks up to them. Terry goes on to invite Luke too, to see the exhibition, alluding that Luke and Jess should attend as a rekindled couple. Jess isn't sure she appreciates Terry meddling in her love life, but Terry has good reasons to. Jess and Luke attend the exhibit, and Eden greets them with good news. Her teacher was a fan of her exhibit, and she has a job as the school's newspaper photojournalist. Eden owes her success to Jess, and her advice to capture a moment that speaks volumes to her as a photographer. Part of the exhibit is a photograph of Jess working on an engine, and Eden basically tells Jess that she's an aspiration in her life. Jess and Luke head out to the bleachers. It's raining, but they have umbrellas as they reminisce about their homecoming day. They touch on the subject of Luke's grandfather. Luke hopes to run the company like he did when he's put in the position. Jess blurts that the breakup was hard for her, and Luke affirms it was the same for him. They both find each other's hands and hold on. It stops raining, and Luke leads Jess to the field to dance, just like they did during homecoming. The 3 contestants are in the final round, and the scoreboards have been cleared, so each of them have an equal chance of winning. The challenge is to spray paint their restoration car with the judges, checking for creativity and quality. Luke wants Jess to win, and tells her so. She's up for the challenge, but it's more than just mere wishing. He wants her to promise that she'll take the crown. Stephen, Luke's dad, invites Ray, Jess's dad, for drinks. Ray smells something fishy and wants Stephen to go straight to the point. Stephen offers him money that in return, Tune Up Wiz will acquire his property. Ray rejects the offer, no matter how enticing Stephen makes it sound. He's confident that Jess will come out victorious, and they'll use the money as needed. He says that Stephen, and his constant dirty tricks, can take the high road. Jess joins Luke by a campfire outside the inn. It's here that Luke mans up and addresses the elephant in the room. He apologizes to Jess for keeping quiet about his father's plans, and commends Jess for being stronger and more courageous than he is. He can say so because she's on the show constantly battling her stage fright for something greater, and it's inspired him to finally stop cowering behind his dad. The sentiments don't stop there, with Jess saying she's finding it easy to stay in the competition because Luke has been a support. Luke is just relieved to have her back in his life, and Jess grabs his face, leaning in for a moment's kiss. When she pulls away, Luke pulls her back in. Jess gets her car painted rather quickly. Luke asks her out for dinner so they can discuss something serious. She agrees to it, and steps out when Stephen meets Luke in the garage on Luke's call to talk. The discussion is about tune-up and barrows. Luke wants his father to back down, but Stephen won't, and would prefer Luke pick his side. Jess overhears the worst part of the conversation, and asks Terry what's going on. The whole news leaves her in panic mode. Luke tries to spray paint his car, but the compressor is jammed, and when he finally gets it working, it's faced in the wrong direction, ruining Jess's work. Jess walks in on the mess, and concludes that Luke entered the competition to sabotage her. She's adamant that coupled with his father's plan, Luke was sent to prevent her from winning. Luke insists it was an accident, and he doesn't want to hurt Jess. But Jess doesn't believe him, especially with history repeating itself. He knew what his father was planning, and held back. Luke invites his dad for another talk and hands him his resignation letter when his persuasion continues to fall on deaf ears. The resignation comes as a shock to Stephen, who warns Luke to think about his future. A broken Luke replies he has, and that's why he's making the decisions that he's making, even though some are a bit too late. Jess feels down about the spray paint gone wrong. She doesn't think she'll be able to fix it in time for the finale. Her father has a private chat with her and teaches her about relationships based on his experience with her mom. He knows her heart is flooded with emotions and brings logic back to the table about the situation. He doesn't think she is right to judge Luke's actions so quickly and harshly. Then, he pulls his little girl in for a hug. Steven talks to Jess to explain Luke isn't the bad guy. This gives Jess the confidence to reach out to Luke. He's just about to drop out of the competition, but Jess needs him to stay because she still needs his support and the friendly competition to keep her grounded. They reconcile, and Jess affirms she'll find a way around the ruined paint. The finale comes, and Wayne lets the audience know that Jess had an accident with her paint. Her car is the last to be revealed, and it's worth the wait. The crowd goes wild, and she's announced as the winner. It calls for celebration, and everyone is in a good mood. Ray and Steven reconcile with talks about re-entering a partnership. Steven was in his feelings because he felt his father had more of a connection with Ray than he did with his own son. Meanwhile, Wayne approaches Jess and Luke with the reviews from the concluded show. Production is willing to give Jess her own show, and she initially wants to pass, but then she gets a great idea of what the show can be about. The show is named Community Garage, with the aim of channeling funds from restored and auctioned cars to the community Jess and Luke come from. Tune Up Wiz is the sponsor, and both Jess and Luke will work hand in hand to restore Bel Air for the pilot episode. When the camera cuts, they seal their new adventure with a kiss.